On Christmas Eve, the streets of Boise were cloaked in white silence. The snow piled thick like a heavy curtain over the city. Church bells rang faintly in the distance, mingling with the sound of choirs rehearsing Stille Nacht, the hymn that had once made my daughter's eyes sparkle. Yet that night, nothing about this season felt holy. My breath froze in the air as I dragged my suitcase through the icy street, my boots sinking deep into the untouched snow. I had returned without warning, my heart pounding with anticipation. After months of grueling training sessions as a taekwondo coach, I longed to surprise my little girl Sarah with the warmth of a mother's embrace. I imagined her running into my arms, her laughter echoing through the house, her cheeks rosy from the cold. But what I found shook me to my very core. The glow of the Whitmore household spilled from its wide windows, golden light dancing across the snow. Inside, I could see a table adorned with roasted goose, steaming bowls of red cabbage, and tall glasses filled with sparkling wine. Laughter rose above the crackling of the fireplace. They toasted, their voices proud, their eyes gleaming with self-satisfaction. The family seemed complete, united in their feast. Yet something was missing. Someone was missing. And then I heard it, so faint it could have been mistaken for the whimper of the winter wind, a fragile, trembling sound like the cry of a bird caught in a storm. I turned toward the porch, my heart seizing. There, beneath the dim outdoor lantern, sat Sarah, my daughter. Her shoulders quivered under the thin blouse clinging to her frail body. Snow had gathered in her hair, melting into her skin, and her lips were pale, almost blue. She clutched her arms around herself as if she were fighting the entire winter alone. I froze, unable to breathe. My mind refused to accept what my eyes saw. Sarah, my own flesh and blood, had been cast out into the night while the Whitmores, the family that was supposed to protect her, celebrated by the fire. Rage surged through me like molten iron. My years of discipline, of teaching young athletes to master body and mind, suddenly collapsed into raw fury. I tore off my heavy coat, wrapped it around her shivering form, and whispered her name. "Sarah," I gasped, my voice breaking, "my child." Her eyelids fluttered, and she looked up at me with eyes that had once been full of light. Now they were hollow, red from tears, as if the world had drained her spirit. "Mama," she whispered, her voice so weak it nearly dissolved into the winter air. She collapsed against my chest, her body trembling like a fragile candle flickering in the storm. At that moment, the world around me disappeared. The bells, the laughter, the glowing windows, all of it faded into a blur. There was only Sarah in my arms, cold as the snow, and the fire of rage in my heart. I pressed her close, vowing silently that no power, neither the Whitmore name nor their gilded traditions, would be allowed to harm her again. Christmas Eve was meant to be a night of peace. Instead, it became the night I discovered my daughter's suffering, the night I swore war against those who had betrayed her. The warmth of the coat did little to fight the brutal cold that clung to my daughter's body. Her breath, faint and irregular, brushed against my neck as I carried her toward the front door. My boots struck the porch with the rhythm of a war drum, each step echoing with fury. Behind the glass, I could still see the Whitmores, laughing, drinking, raising their glasses high as if they had conquered the world. Their merriment was a cruel contrast to the fragile weight I held in my arms. I tightened my grip around Sarah. She stirred, murmuring my name, but her voice was too weak to rise above the storm in my chest. I pressed my lips to her hair, whispering, "You are safe now. I will not let them break you again." Then, with a force I did not know I still possessed, I pounded on the heavy oak door. Once, twice, 3 times. Each knock thundered like a verdict, shaking the frame, demanding attention. For a brief moment, silence fell inside. The laughter ceased. Only the faint crackling of the fireplace remained. The door creaked open. Standing before me was Margaret Whitmore, her red lips curled into a smile that never reached her eyes. She held a crystal glass of wine, the deep burgundy liquid trembling slightly as she raised her brows in mock surprise. "Well," she said, her tone dripping with feigned politeness, "if it isn't Miss Carterson, what in—" Unexpected visit. Her eyes slid to Sarah in my arms, and I saw the flicker of disdain she didn't bother to hide. I stepped forward, my voice sharp as steel. Unexpected? Do you think a mother must announce herself to save her child from freezing to death? Margaret's smile faltered, but quickly returned, tighter than before. Oh, don't exaggerate. Sarah wanted some fresh air. She's too delicate, always making a scene. You really shouldn't. Fresh air? My voice rose, trembling with restrained fury. You call this fresh air? She was dying out there, alone, while you sat by the fire, toasting your precious traditions. The sound of chairs scraping interrupted us. From behind her, Daniel, my son-in-law, appeared. His shirt was half unbuttoned, his posture dripping with arrogance. He swayed slightly, a bottle of wine dangling from his hand, his cheeks flushed with drink. Mother, he muttered, his voice slurred yet laced with defiance, close the door. Let her stay outside, she'll calm down eventually. His eyes met mine, cold, unfeeling, the gaze of a man who no longer saw my daughter as a person but as a burden. Something inside me snapped. You dare? I hissed. You dare cast away your wife, the woman who shared her soul with you, who lost 4 children because of you, and now you mock her suffering? Daniel chuckled, a bitter sound. She fakes it, always has. Depression, miscarriages, weakness. It's her excuse to do nothing. If it weren't for my parents, she'd already be gone. Behind him, Olivia, his sister, appeared, her sharp voice cutting through the air. Exactly. She's useless. A wife who can't even give us heirs. What is she worth? Nothing but trouble. The words fell like knives. Sarah stirred weakly in my arms, her body flinching with every insult as if each syllable pierced her skin. Her lips trembled, but no sound came. I pressed her closer, shielding her with my coat, with my very body. My rage blazed higher. Useless? You dare call my daughter useless? She has endured loss after loss, each miscarriage tearing her apart, and you dare mock her pain? A voice boomed from within. Judge William Whitmore, the patriarch, rose from his chair. Tall, imposing, his silver hair gleamed under the chandelier. He carried himself like a man accustomed to command, his deep voice resonant with cold authority. Enough, he declared. This is a family matter. She is our daughter-in-law, and she must learn endurance. A woman who cannot bear children has no place questioning her role. His words were delivered like a judicial ruling, final and merciless. I met his gaze, unflinching. And you, I spat, a judge who spent his life pretending to uphold justice, this is how you define family? By cruelty? By humiliation? You disgust me. A hush fell over the room. Even the children, Olivia's 2 little ones, had run to the doorway, their innocent laughter silenced as they stared wide-eyed. Then one of them whispered with a giggle, Aunt Sarah is in trouble. Their words, though innocent, twisted the knife deeper. Sarah whimpered against my chest. I could feel her despair pulsing through her fragile body. My heart fractured, but my resolve hardened. I shifted her weight in my arms, then with one violent motion, I shoved the door wide open with my shoulder. It slammed against the wall, rattling the frames of their expensive paintings. Gasps filled the room. The music cut off. Wine spilled onto the Persian carpet, staining it crimson like blood. I stepped inside, carrying Sarah, leaving a trail of snow and melted ice across their polished floor. Every eye turned to me, shocked, hostile, accusing, but I no longer cared. Carefully, I laid Sarah on the velvet couch, draping my scarf over her trembling shoulders. Then I straightened, my fists clenched at my sides, my eyes blazing. You call yourselves a family, I said, my voice low, each word deliberate. But you are nothing more than cowards hiding behind wealth and arrogance. Tonight, you will hear me. Tonight, you will answer for what you have done to my daughter. The room vibrated with tension. William narrowed his eyes, Margaret raised her chin, Olivia folded her arms. Yet for the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in their faces. I was no longer just a mother. I was a storm at their doorstep, and this was only the beginning. The moment I laid Sarah down on the velvet couch, the atmosphere in the Whitmore household shifted. The golden glow of the chandelier seemed colder. The warmth of the fireplace turned sinister, casting long shadows on the polished floor. Every pair of eyes, haughty, disdainful, burning with quiet malice, was fixed on me. Sarah trembled under the scarf I had thrown over her. Her fingers clutched the fabric as if it were a lifeline, her lips moving but no sound emerging. I brushed her hair back gently, whispering, "You are safe, my child." Then I turned to face them. Daniel stepped forward, smirking, his bottle of wine dangling loosely in his hand. "This is my house," he said, his voice heavy with arrogance. "You don't get to come here and humiliate us in front of our guests." "Humiliate you?" My laughter burst out, sharp and bitter. "It is you who humiliate yourselves. Cast your wife into the freezing night, mock her suffering, toast while she withers on the porch. This is the family you are so proud of?" Daniel's smirk hardened into a snarl. "Stop playing the saint. She exaggerates everything. Depression, miscarriages, always some excuse. She's weak. She can't even cook a proper meal without whining." Sarah stirred weakly, whispering, "That's not true," but her voice was drowned by Olivia's sharp tone. "Pathetic," Olivia sneered, her hands crossed elegantly over her chest. 4 miscarriages. 4. Do you know how shameful that is? She is a disgrace to our family name. A wife who cannot give children is no wife at all. The words hit me like a slap, but I refused to let them see my pain. I stepped closer, pointing a trembling finger at Olivia. "And you, what kind of sister humiliates a grieving woman? You stand there dripping with jewelry and contempt, while my daughter bleeds inside from wounds you cannot even comprehend." Olivia rolled her eyes, unbothered. "Spare me the theatrics. She plays the victim to gain sympathy. Everyone sees it." The children standing by the staircase began to giggle again, whispering, "Aunt Sarah's in trouble." Their innocent cruelty sliced deeper than any blade. Sarah curled into herself on the couch, her body folding like paper in the firelight. I could no longer contain myself. "Enough!" My voice thundered through the room, echoing against the walls. "You dare poison even the minds of children with your cruelty? You dare turn her suffering into entertainment?" Judge William rose slowly from his chair, towering like a monument of stone. His deep voice cut through the chaos. "Control yourself, Miss Carterson. You are a guest here, and you will show respect. This is a family matter, and outsiders have no place interfering." "Outsider?" My voice cracked with fury. "I am her mother. The blood in her veins is mine. You may have given her your name, but you have never given her love, never given her protection. If this is family, then your family is rotten to the core." His eyes narrowed, the firelight glinting in them like cold steel. "Be careful with your words. I have spent a lifetime in courtrooms. I know how to destroy those who cross me." I met his gaze without flinching. "And I have spent a lifetime training warriors. I know how to stand when storms break, and I will not bend to your threats." For a moment, silence fell. Only the crackle of the fire remained. Then Margaret, still holding her wineglass, stepped forward with that sickly smile painted on her lips. "Why cause such a scene?" she purred. "It is Christmas, after all. Sarah is fragile. She needed a little discipline. Don't all weak women? Better to harden her now than let her wallow in self-pity forever." I felt Sarah's hand clutch mine, her skin cold, her pulse faint. Tears welled in my eyes, but I held them back, channeling every drop of grief into fire. "Discipline?" I roared. "You call abandonment discipline? You call cruelty discipline? You dress your malice in fine words, but the stench of your hatred fills this house." The room bristled. Daniel slammed his bottle on the table, wine splattering like blood across the white tablecloth. "Enough! You don't get to lecture us. She is my wife, and in this house she will do as I say." I stepped forward, my face inches from his, my voice low, trembling with fury. "No, she is not your possession. She is my daughter, and from this moment on, I swear you will not harm her again." Gasps rippled through the room. Evelyn scoffed, William clenched his jaw, Olivia whispered something venomous under her breath. But none of it mattered. I felt the power of my vow settle in the air like thunder before a storm. Sarah tried to rise, her weak voice breaking through the tension. "Mama, please, stop. I don't want this. I knelt beside her, holding her face in my hands, tears finally spilling. You don't have to be strong anymore, Sarah. I will fight for you. I will fight them all. The Whitmores exchanged glances, smirks, frowns, narrowed eyes. They thought me dramatic, thought me powerless, but I saw the flicker of unease in their composure. They had built their empire on intimidation, on silence, and I had broken that silence. I straightened, my hands still trembling but my voice steady. This ends tonight. No more mockery, no more cruelty. I will not let this house be her prison. Daniel sneered. And what will you do, old woman? Call the police? Tell the world? I held his gaze, a grim smile tugging at my lips. Yes, I whispered, every syllable like a blade. That is exactly what I will do. The room froze. For the first time, I saw fear flash in Daniel's eyes, quickly masked by defiance. William's jaw tightened, Margaret's smile slipped, Olivia's arms crossed tighter across her chest. Outside, the winter wind howled against the windows, rattling the glass like a warning from the heavens. Inside, the fire crackled louder, throwing sparks into the air, as if the house itself sensed the storm about to break. And in my heart, I knew this was no longer just a mother's fight. It was the opening battle of a war. The silence after my vow was unbearable, heavy like the ceiling might collapse under its weight. Only Sarah's shallow breaths broke the stillness, each one trembling as though life itself clung by a thread. My hands shook, not from fear, but from rage so profound it threatened to consume me. I pulled my phone from my coat pocket. The glow of the screen seemed almost sacrilegious in this room of shadows and deceit. With a steady finger, I dialed the emergency number. My voice, when I spoke, was calm, deliberate, and cold as ice. This is Linda Carterson. I am reporting domestic abuse. The victim is my daughter, Sarah Miller. Address, Meadow Creek, 12th Street, Boise. She was abandoned outside in freezing temperatures while her husband's family feasted inside. She is gravely unwell. I demand immediate assistance. Every eye in the room widened. Margaret's wineglass clinked against the table as her hand trembled for the first time. Daniel let out a bitter laugh, stepping closer, towering over me. You wouldn't dare, he sneered. Do you think anyone will believe you? You're nothing but an angry old woman. My family has influence in this city. The police won't touch us. I met his arrogance with a cold smile. We shall see. Sarah stirred weakly on the couch, clutching my scarf tighter. Mama, don't, please. Her whisper carried both fear and exhaustion, but I squeezed her hand, whispering back, You are not alone anymore. Minutes later, a sharp knock echoed from the front door. The Whitmores stiffened, exchanging wary glances. The knock came again, firmer this time. Daniel cursed under his breath, but before he could move, I strode to the door and flung it open. There stood Officer Jack Reynolds, his figure stark against the swirling snow. His uniform was dusted with frost, his breath rising in clouds, but his presence radiated steady authority. His sharp eyes flicked from my face to Sarah's trembling form on the couch. Recognition flashed in them. Miss Carterson, he said, his voice firm but tinged with surprise. I got your call. For a moment, memory pierced the haze of fury. Years ago, Jack had been a boy in my dojo, struggling to master discipline and strength. Now he stood before me, tall, confident, carrying the weight of the law. Yes, Jack, I said, my voice steady. You came just in time. He stepped inside, boots crunching against the polished floor, leaving a trail of snow. The Whitmores shifted uneasily as his gaze swept over the room. What's going on here? He asked, his tone cutting through the tension like a blade. Daniel stepped forward immediately, his practiced lawyer's smile plastered across his face. Officer, thank goodness you're here. There's been a misunderstanding. My wife tends to exaggerate her condition. My mother-in-law here is overreacting. Everything is fine. Jack's eyes narrowed. Your wife is on the verge of hypothermia. He moved quickly to Sarah, kneeling beside her, his face softened as he touched her icy hand. Ms. Miller, can you hear me? Sarah's lips parted, her voice barely audible. So cold. Jack looked up at me, his jaw tightening. She needs medical attention. Margaret interjected, her tone sugary but brittle. Officer, please. She wanted some fresh air. We simply respected her wishes. You know how emotional young women can be. Enough, Jack snapped, his voice echoing through the room with unexpected force. This is not discipline. This is negligence at best, abuse at worst. The room froze. For the first time, the Whitmores' masks cracked. William leaned forward, his deep voice heavy with authority. Young man, do you know who you're speaking to? I am Judge Whitmore. I have served this city for decades. You would do well to show respect. Jack rose slowly, meeting William's icy stare without flinching. With all due respect, sir, tonight I'm not looking at a judge. I'm looking at a man whose family may have endangered a woman's life. The law applies to everyone. A stunned silence followed. Even I had to catch my breath. In that moment, I no longer saw the boy who once bowed nervously on the mats of my dojo. I saw a man forged by duty, unafraid of power. Daniel's face flushed crimson. You can't come into my house and accuse us like this. Sarah is my wife. What happens here is none of your business. Jack's gaze hardened. It becomes my business when it crosses the line into criminal abuse. And right now, everything I see points in that direction. I felt a surge of gratitude, a fragile spark of hope. For the first time that night, I was not alone in this battle. Jack stood tall, his hand resting on his radio. I'll be filing an incident report. Medical services are on their way. Until then, no one here is to interfere with Mr. Miller's care. Do I make myself clear? The Whitmores shifted, their arrogance bruised. William clenched his fists, Margaret turned pale. Olivia muttered curses under her breath. Daniel spat angrily but said nothing. I returned to Sarah, brushing snow from her hair. You're safe now, sweetheart, I whispered. Help is here. Her eyes fluttered open, meeting Jack's for the briefest moment. A tear slipped down her cheek. She whispered, thank you, before collapsing back against the cushions. Jack glanced at me, his voice quiet but firm. I'll stand by you, Miss Carterson. Whatever comes after tonight, you're not alone. The Whitmores might still wield their influence, but in that moment, their power trembled. For the first time, I saw fear in their eyes, and I knew the war had truly begun. The ambulance arrived minutes later, its siren muted by the thick curtain of snow. Paramedics rushed in, wrapping Sarah in thermal blankets, checking her pulse, whispering medical terms that made my heart clench. I followed every move, unwilling to let her out of my sight. Daniel stood back, arms crossed, muttering under his breath. Margaret sipped her wine again, her lips pressed into a thin, disdainful line. William said nothing, but his eyes, sharp, cold, followed me with the weight of judgment. When the medics prepared to lift Sarah onto the stretcher, she grasped my hand with what little strength she had. Her lips quivered, forming a single word, Mama. I bent close, pressing my forehead to hers. I am here, my child. I will not leave you again. Jack gave me a brief nod. Take her home tonight, Miss Carterson. She needs warmth, safety, quiet. I'll file the report and follow up tomorrow. But be careful. The Whitmores won't take this humiliation lightly. His words echoed in my chest like a warning bell. I thanked him, then climbed into the ambulance beside my daughter. The ride to my apartment was silent, save for the beeping of the monitor and the hiss of oxygen. Outside, the streets of Boise glistened with holiday lights, the colors blurring through the frosted windows. Families hurried along the sidewalks, clutching gifts, their laughter muffled by scarves. To them it was Christmas Eve, a night of joy. To me, it was the night I carried my broken child away from a house that had tried to destroy her spirit. My apartment near the National Training Center was small, modest, but it was mine. The air smelled faintly of tea, and the old wooden floors creaked with familiarity. I had once considered it too lonely, too bare. Now, as I carried Sarah inside, it became a sanctuary. I laid her gently on my bed, pulling quilts around her frail body. Her cheeks were pale, her hair damp, but her breathing steadied under the weight of warmth. I brewed chamomile tea, its soft aroma filling the room, and placed the cup on the nightstand, though I knew she was too weak to drink. Sitting beside her, I stroked her hair as if she were still a little girl coming home from school, seeking comfort after a bad day. Tears stung my eyes, but I swallowed them. I had promised her strength, not weakness. It was past midnight when I finally allowed myself to sit at the kitchen table. My suitcase still stood by the door, snow melting into small puddles on the floor. I hadn't unpacked. I hadn't even taken off my boots. I simply sat, staring at the steam rising from a mug of black tea, listening to the faint hum of the heater. Then I heard it, a faint rustle outside, followed by the scrape of paper against wood. My pulse quickened. I rose, walked to the door, and found an envelope lying on the mat. No knock, no footsteps, just silence. I bent down, picked it up, and felt the roughness of the paper, damp from melted snow. My name was scrawled across the front in jagged handwriting, Linda Carterson. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the ink smudged as though written in haste. Stay quiet. Stop meddling in matters you don't understand. If you don't, you will end up just as miserable as your daughter. This is your only warning. My hand trembled as I read, not from fear but from fury. They had dared to threaten me in my own home while my daughter lay broken in the next room. The audacity was staggering. I crumpled the note into my fist, feeling the paper bite into my skin. Rage surged through me, but beneath it, something stronger took root. Resolve. If the Whitmores thought this would silence me, they had underestimated the strength of a mother's will. I threw the crumpled paper into the trash, the sound sharp in the stillness. I returned to Sarah's bedside. She stirred in her sleep, whispering incoherently, caught in some dark dream. I brushed her hair back, whispering, "Rest, mein Kind, you are safe now. Whatever storm comes, I will shield you." Sitting there in the dim light, I felt the weight of the night press down on me. The injustice, the cruelty, the looming battle. Yet in that same weight, I found clarity. This was no longer about surviving Christmas Eve. This was about reclaiming my daughter's dignity, her future. And if the Whitmores wanted war, then war they would have. Morning broke reluctantly over Boise. The snow outside had settled into heavy drifts, muffling the city in a silence that felt almost sacred. But inside my small apartment, the silence was restless, broken by the occasional creak of the radiator and Sarah's soft, uneven breathing. She had slept for hours, her body exhausted, her spirit worn thin. When she finally stirred, blinking at the dim light filtering through the curtains, her first words were not of hunger or warmth, but of apology. "I'm sorry, Mama," she whispered, her voice brittle as porcelain. "I've ruined everything." I clasped her hand tightly, shaking my head. "No, Sarah, you have endured more than anyone should. The shame does not belong to you. It belongs to them." But her eyes, red-rimmed and hollow, told me she did not believe me. That afternoon, I called in a favor from an old acquaintance, a therapist I trusted, Dr. Helen Foster, a woman whose calm presence had once guided many athletes under my care through storms of anxiety and doubt. She agreed to see Sarah immediately, despite the holiday. The office was warm, filled with soft light and the faint smell of lavender. Shelves lined with books and small wooden figurines gave the room a quiet dignity. Sarah sat curled in the armchair, her blouse loose around her thin shoulders, her gaze fixed on the carpet. I sat beside her, unwilling to let go of her hand. Dr. Foster observed her for a moment, then spoke gently. "Sarah, I'd like to hear from you. In your own words, how have you been feeling?" For a long time there was only silence. Sarah's lips parted, but no words came. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling silently down her cheeks. Finally, in a voice so faint it nearly dissolved, she said, "Empty, like there's nothing left inside me." The words pierced me, but Dr. Foster nodded calmly, encouraging her. Sarah continued haltingly. She spoke of the 4 miscarriages, each one a wound deeper than the last, of the nights she sat alone in her room while the Whitmores laughed downstairs, of the cruel words, useless, weak, failure, that had been carved into her soul. By the time she finished, her body trembled violently, as though confessing had reopened every scar. Dr. Foster leaned forward, her voice steady but heavy with gravity. "Miss Carterson, your daughter is suffering from severe clinical depression, compounded by repeated trauma and psychological abuse. She needs immediate rest, therapy, and protection from further harm. If she stays in that environment, I fear for her safety." I gripped Sarah's hand tighter, fighting back tears. "You are not broken," I whispered to her. "You are wounded, but you will heal. I will see to it." Dr. Foster placed a hand on mine. "Document everything. Every insult, every incident. Gather medical records, financial statements, anything that shows a pattern of neglect or control. They will fight you, but evidence is your shield." Her words ignited something in me. Not just a mother's grief, but a warrior's resolve. That evening, after settling Sarah back in bed, I pulled out the old metal box I had carried through years of travel. Inside were papers, neatly folded, kept more out of habit than foresight. Bank transfer receipts, handwritten notes attached to each deposit. For Sarah's groceries, for the electricity bill, for the baby's room. I laid them out on the kitchen table, each slip of paper a testament to my support, each one proof that I had tried to give my daughter stability, even from afar. My hands shook as I unfolded messages she had sent me. "Mama, thank you. I'll buy a crib with this. He says we don't need it. Maybe I'll save for later. I lost the baby. Again. I don't know how to keep going." I read them over and over, the words searing into me like brands. Then I opened a folder Dr. Foster had given me, medical reports confirming Sarah's miscarriages, notations of her declining mental health, prescriptions for antidepressants she had never been allowed to fill. Each page was both unbearable to read and impossible to ignore. The evidence was piling up, heavy as stones, yet still not enough to topple the fortress of the Whitmore name. But it was a start. As midnight approached, I sat surrounded by papers, the hum of the radiator filling the silence. Sarah stirred in the other room, murmuring in her sleep, caught in the echo of nightmares. I rose, tucked the quilt tighter around her, and returned to my table. There, under the dim light, I made a vow, not whispered, not hidden, but spoken aloud into the stillness. I will not let them destroy you. Every document, every memory, every scar, they will all become part of the truth, and the truth will be our weapon. The shadows seemed to listen. The snow outside pressed against the window panes like the weight of the world. But in my chest, a fire burned steady. The Whitmores had wealth, influence, and arrogance, but I had something stronger, a mother's resolve, sharpened by grief, tempered by love, unbreakable as iron. And I knew the battle had only just begun. The courthouse in Boise stood tall and gray, its stone columns streaked with decades of snow and rain. On that winter morning, its shadow loomed heavy over us as Sarah and I approached. She walked beside me, her frail body wrapped in my coat, her eyes fixed on the ground. Her hand trembled in mine, cold not from the weather, but from the weight of dread. Inside, the hall smelled faintly of polish and old paper. The sound of footsteps and murmurs echoed against marble walls. We passed through security, the guards barely glancing at us. To them, we were just another case on the endless docket. But to me, this was everything. Our lawyer, Michael Hayes, met us near the courtroom doors. He was a man in his 40s, calm and deliberate, carrying a briefcase that seemed far too small for the weight it bore. He greeted Sarah softly, then turned to me. "I'll present the evidence. Keep steady, Miss Carterson. They'll try to provoke you." I nodded, though inside my chest my heart was a war drum. When the session began, the judge, Judge Anderson, took his seat with an expression carved from stone. His gavel struck once, sharp and final. On the right sat the Whitmore family. Daniel wore a tailored gray suit, his hair slicked back, his smirk rehearsed. Beside him, Margaret, in an emerald dress, her lips painted red, sat as though on a throne. Olivia whispered into her ear, both women smiling faintly. And behind them, like a shadow, William Whitmore, his presence dominating the row, his gaze cold and unblinking. I felt Sarah shrink beside me, her shoulders curling inward. I placed my hand on hers, whispering, "Look forward, mankind. Do not let them see your fear." Michael Hayes rose first. His voice, calm but edged with steel, filled the room. "Your Honor, we present evidence of repeated abuse, both psychological and physical neglect, inflicted upon Sarah Miller by her husband and his family. Exhibit A, financial records of continuous transfers from her mother, Linda Carterson, demonstrating that Sarah was denied financial independence. Exhibit B, medical documentation of 4 miscarriages, each accompanied by notes of emotional distress and lack of family support. Exhibit C, clinical testimony from Dr. Helen Foster, diagnosing severe depression caused by constant humiliation and abandonment. He laid the documents on the judge's desk, each page landing like a blow. For a moment, silence hung. I dared to hope. But then Daniel's lawyer, a young man in a black suit, rose with a smile so sharp it could cut glass. Your Honor, my clients reject these accusations. The transfers? Generous gifts from a mother unwilling to let go. The medical records? Tragic, yes, but hardly proof of abuse. Miscarriages are a biological misfortune, not a crime. As for Dr. Foster's diagnosis, subjective opinions, nothing more. He paced slowly, his voice smooth, persuasive. This is not a case of abuse. This is a case of a woman exaggerating her frailty, encouraged by an overprotective mother. The Whitmore family has provided her with a home, comfort, and every necessity. Yet she fails in her duties as a wife, and now seeks to shame them with baseless claims. His words slithered across the courtroom like snakes. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms until I felt pain. Then Michael signaled to Jack, sitting in the back row in his uniform. Jack rose, his voice steady. On Christmas Eve, I responded to Miss Carterson's call. I found Sarah Miller outside the Whitmore home, exposed to freezing temperatures, dressed only in a blouse. She displayed clear signs of hypothermia. This is not hearsay. I saw it with my own eyes. A murmur spread through the room. For a moment, the truth shone, but William leaned forward, his deep voice booming. Officer, did my daughter-in-law not leave the house of her own accord? Did she not choose to sit outside? You cannot prove otherwise. Jack faltered. She was nearly unconscious. Answer the question, William pressed, his eyes glinting with judicial precision. Did you see anyone force her outside? The silence stretched. Jack's jaw tightened. No, but then your testimony is speculation. Daniel's lawyer cut in, seizing the moment. And speculation has no place in this courtroom. The judge nodded curtly. Strike that from the record. My breath caught. I wanted to scream, to stand and shout that no woman chooses to freeze herself to death while her family toasts inside. But Michael placed a hand on my arm, steadying me. Then came the final blow. Your Honor, Michael said, his voice resolute, we have a recording from that night. Words spoken by the Whitmore family themselves, insults, mockery, admissions of cruelty. Let the court hear it. He pressed play. Daniel's voice filled the room, cruel and cold. She fakes depression to dodge her duties. Then Margaret's, a woman who can't have children, is useless. And Olivia's laughter, she can't even manage to give birth. The courtroom fell silent. The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire. Sarah covered her face, sobbing silently. I felt every muscle in my body tighten, rage and pain entwined. This was the proof, the undeniable truth. But before hope could take root, Daniel's lawyer shot to his feet. Objection! This recording was obtained without consent. It violates privacy rights. It is inadmissible. The judge's face hardened. He struck his gavel once. Sustained. The recording is not valid evidence. Strike it from the record. My world tilted. The one piece of truth we had, their own voices, dismissed with a single stroke. Around us, whispers filled the courtroom. Some gasped, some shook their heads. But I heard only the sound of Sarah's muffled sobs, her body trembling beside me. I wanted to rise, to shout at the judge, to tear through the lies that shielded the Whitmores. But Michael leaned close, whispering, Not now. Control yourself. We fight on. I swallowed the scream burning in my throat, my nails cutting into my palms. Across the room, Daniel smirked, Evelyn's lips curled into satisfaction, and William gave the faintest nod, as if confirming a plan long in place. And in that moment I understood. This was not just a trial. It was a stage, and justice itself was being played like a puppet in the hands of power. The final day of the trial dawned with a bitter chill. Frost clung to the courthouse steps, glistening like shards of glass under a pale sun. As Sarah and I entered, her hand trembling in mine, I felt the weight of inevitability pressing down. For a week we had fought, evidence against denial, truth against power. Now the verdict awaited. Inside the courtroom, the Whitmores were already seated, poised like victors awaiting their crown. Daniel adjusted his tie with a smug flick of his wrist. Margaret whispered to Olivia, their painted lips curving into knowing smiles. William sat tall, his presence radiating authority, his eyes calm with the certainty of a man who believed he had already won. Sarah lowered her gaze, her shoulders hunched. Her face was pale, shadows beneath her eyes betraying nights of sleepless fear. I squeezed her hand, whispering, "Look at me, mein kind. Whatever they take, they cannot take your soul." She nodded faintly, though her eyes remained empty. The judge entered. His expression was void of empathy, his gavel striking like thunder. Silence fell. "In the matter of Sarah Miller versus Daniel Whitmore," Judge Anderson intoned, his voice dry as parchment, "this court grants the dissolution of marriage." A murmur rippled through the room. Relief surged faintly in me. At least she would be freed from his name, from his household. I turned to Sarah, but her eyes glistened with tears, too fragile to believe. The judge continued, "However, the court finds insufficient legal evidence to support the claim of domestic abuse. Therefore, the allegations are dismissed." The words struck like a hammer to my chest. Insufficient evidence. The medical reports, the testimony, the recording, all swept aside, discarded like whispers in the wind. I felt my breath catch, my throat tightening as if the air had turned to stone. And furthermore, the judge said, adjusting his glasses, regarding division of assets, given Mr. Whitmore's greater financial contribution to the marriage, the majority of shared property is hereby awarded to him. The gavel struck again. Final. Cold. Sarah gasped, her body trembling beside me. She pressed her hands to her face, muffling a sob that escaped like a wounded bird. I wrapped my arm around her, but my own body shook. Across the aisle, Daniel smirked, turning just enough so I could see his triumph. Margaret's smile widened. Olivia leaned back in her chair with satisfaction, and William gave a small nod, as though closing the final page of a case already written. It was theater, orchestrated from the start. I shot to my feet, unable to contain the storm inside me. "This is unjust." My voice rang through the courtroom, trembling with fury. "You heard her pain, you saw her suffering, and still you dare say there was no abuse? You strip her of dignity, of security, of everything and call it justice?" The judge slammed his gavel. "Order in the court," but I did not sit. "You protect the powerful and abandon the weak. Is this your justice? A mother's testimony, a daughter's tears, nothing in your eyes but dust? Tell me, Your Honor, what would you call it if not cruelty?" Gasps echoed. Some spectators averted their gaze, others whispered with unease. Sarah clutched my sleeve, begging softly, "Mama, please stop." A bailiff moved forward, his voice stern. "Sit down, ma'am, or you will be removed." I sank back slowly, my fists clenched, my chest heaving. My words had changed nothing. They never intended them to. The courtroom emptied. Papers shuffled, footsteps echoed, murmurs filled the air. But in my ears, only Sarah's muffled sobs remained. She covered her face, her body trembling as though the verdict had stripped the last shred of hope from her. I wanted to promise her safety, to tell her that we would rise again. But the words caught in my throat, suffocated by despair. Daniel strode past us, pausing only to lean close. His whisper, dripping with venom, seared into my ear. "I told you, old woman, you cannot win." He straightened, smirking, before walking away with his family. Their laughter, soft and cruel, lingered in the air like the echo of chains. I trembled with rage, my nails biting into my palms. Years of discipline as a coach had taught me to restrain violence. But in that moment, all I wanted was to strike, to make him feel even a fraction of the pain he had inflicted on Sarah. Behind me, I sensed movement. Officer Jack Reynolds had risen from the gallery, his fists clenched, his jaw tight. For a moment, I thought he would leap across the aisle. His eyes burned with the same fury I felt, a silent storm restrained only by duty. Sarah pulled at my sleeve, her voice breaking. "No more, Mama. I can't bear it. Let's go home." Her words cut deeper than any verdict. I gathered her into my arms, holding her frail body as though it might vanish. Together we walked out of the courtroom, past the marble pillars, into the biting cold. Outside, the sky was gray, the air sharp with winter. Snowflakes drifted slowly, indifferent to human suffering. Sarah leaned against me, her tears soaking into my coat. The court had spoken. They had declared power greater than truth, influence greater than justice. But as I looked into my daughter's broken eyes, I swore silently, this fight was not over. The Whitmores had won a battle, but the war had just begun. The courthouse doors closed behind us with a weight that felt eternal. The verdict still echoed in my ears, dismissal of abuse, assets awarded to Daniel, as though the walls themselves had memorized the cruelty. Snow drifted silently onto the steps, covering footprints, erasing traces of those who had passed. But nothing could erase the image of Sarah's face, pale and hollow, as justice slipped through her fingers. We returned to my apartment, the small rooms filled with the faint hum of the radiator and the smell of chamomile tea. Sarah sat in silence, staring at the window as if the snow outside could swallow her whole. For days, she barely spoke. She ate little, her movements sluggish, as though the trial had drained the last ember of life from her. I tried to stay strong, tending to her quietly, brewing soups, laying quilts over her shoulders. But when night came and she slept, I sat at the kitchen table, my hands trembling over the stack of rejected evidence. The law had failed us, but somewhere deep inside I knew the truth could not be buried forever. It began with a photograph. Someone in the courtroom had captured the moment when Sarah clung to Officer Jack Reynolds, her frail body trembling, her tear-streaked face turned upward as she begged him not to fight. That image spread like wildfire across social media. Within hours, it was shared hundreds of times. Within days, thousands. The caption varied. This is what despair looks like. Others wrote, a woman denied justice, and many more. The Whitmores can buy a verdict, but not silence. Then came the video. A journalist had recorded part of the trial, Sarah's broken voice whispering, I'm tired, no one understands. The clip spread across local news stations, then national outlets. People we had never met began to speak her name. I watched it unfold with disbelief. At first, I feared exposure would harm her more, that strangers would mock or dismiss her pain. But the opposite happened. Messages flooded in. Neighbors knocked softly on my door, leaving food, flowers, words of encouragement. Former students from my dojo wrote emails. Coach, we stand with you. Sarah deserves better. Letters arrived, some from across the state, others from as far as New York and Chicago. Women who had suffered similar fates shared their stories, each one a candle lit in the darkness. The local newspaper ran a headline, Whitmore Trial, Justice Bought, Humanity Lost. Another wrote, The Tears of Sarah Miller, a city confronts its conscience. The Whitmores, once untouchable, began to feel the weight of public scorn. Whispers followed them in the streets, their names spoken with disdain. Former colleagues of William muttered about conflicts of interest, rumors of strings pulled behind the bench. Daniel, once seen as a promising lawyer, found his clients dwindling. His name became synonymous with cruelty. For the first time, their fortress cracked, not by the law, but by the voices of ordinary people. One evening, I sat with Sarah at the kitchen table. She held a newspaper in her trembling hands, her eyes fixed on the photograph of herself, broken in court yet now transformed into a symbol. They're talking about me, she whispered, her voice fragile. All these people, strangers, they care. I nodded, brushing her hair back gently. Because they see the truth, Mainkind. They see what the court refused to acknowledge. Tears welled in her eyes, but this time they were not only of despair. There was a glimmer, faint but real, of something else. Recognition. Validation. That night, Officer Jack visited. He carried no uniform, only a paper bag with fruit and a small poinsettia, its red leaves bright against the winter gloom. He sat quietly, listening as Sarah spoke haltingly of her pain, her fear, her disbelief at the kindness of strangers. When she faltered, Jack leaned forward, his voice steady. Sarah, you are not alone. The Whitmores may hold power, but power is fragile when the world sees its cruelty. People are standing with you, and I will stand with you too. Sarah looked at him for a long moment. Her lips quivered, then curved into the faintest hesitant smile, the first I had seen in weeks. In that fragile smile, I glimpsed a beginning. Yet I knew the war was not over. The Whitmores would not surrender easily. Behind their closed doors, they plotted, schemed, seeking to reclaim the control slipping through their fingers. Already I had received another letter slipped beneath my door, the words jagged with menace. "This is not finished. Back down, or you'll regret it." I crumpled it, tossing it into the fire. The flames devoured the threat, but the resolve in my heart only burned brighter. The law had failed us, but the people had not. And perhaps in their voices we would find the strength to fight again. Spring crept slowly into Boise, melting the last of the snow, washing the gray streets with pale sunlight. In my small apartment, the atmosphere shifted with the seasons. Sarah, once curled into silence, began to stir with fragile signs of life. She would sit by the window in the mornings, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea, watching the world awaken. At first she said nothing, but her eyes no longer carried only emptiness. They began to search again. Jack visited often, sometimes bringing flowers, sometimes pastries from a corner bakery. His presence was quiet, steady, never demanding. Sarah responded to him in small ways, a nod, a faint smile, a whispered thank you. Each gesture was like a fragile blossom breaking through the frost. On Easter Sunday, I took Sarah by the hand and led her into the city square. The air was filled with the scent of fresh bread, children laughing, and church bells ringing with solemn joy. Families gathered in their best clothes, vendors sold painted eggs, and the fountain sparkled beneath the spring sun. For the first time in months, Sarah lifted her face to the light. We sat on a wooden bench near the fountain. Jack joined us, carrying warm churros wrapped in paper. He offered one to Sarah, who hesitated before taking it. She bit into the sweet pastry, her lips curling into a smile so radiant, so sudden that my breath caught. It was the smile I thought I might never see again. "Mom," she said softly, her voice steadier than before. "I want to live. I want to begin again." Tears blurred my vision, but I nodded, squeezing her hand. "Then we will, mankind, together." The church bells tolled once more, echoing across the square. Around us, life pulsed with color and sound, but in that moment there was only Sarah, reborn from pain, fragile yet determined. Justice in the courts had failed us, but here, beneath the Easter sun, I saw a deeper justice, the justice of survival, of love stronger than cruelty, of a will that refused to be broken. The Whitmores might still plot, their power might linger in shadows, but as I held my daughter's hand, watching her smile return, I knew they could never take this from us. For the first time in a long time, I believed in tomorrow.